Good Sunday morning. I'm meteorologist Chris Ramirez with the KHOU 11 weather team. We are tracking the tropics. We have some activity going on across the Atlantic basin. We have Hurricane Erin. Also, we're tracking another tropical wave emerging off the African coast that the National Weather Service has highlighted. There is another little disturbance just off the east coast U.S. that has a 10% chance of development. More than likely, that's not going to form into anything. That is actually quite lower as of the 10 a.m. advisory than what we saw earlier. We had 20% earlier today. However, it's the next wave that's on the way that's off the African coast that has a 20% chance of development. This is something that we're going to have to keep an eye on pretty closely in the coming days because models are hinting that this could very well take a similar path to Erin. And it's also getting closer towards the peak of hurricane season as that wave makes its long track across the Atlantic Ocean. So models taking it just north of South America and then eventually back into the Caribbean islands. But as we look at the developmental areas and the steering currents that are currently in place right now, we have a large high that's currently over the Atlantic. We have a high that's over the continual U.S. And you're able to see that Erin is taking the path of least resistance and being swung out towards the northeast. But that new area that we're going to have to watch likely could take a more of a similar path as we head into the next few days. And so something to keep an eye on. And when it comes to the developmental areas during the months of August and September, we usually see them take a more of a northerly track across the Atlantic. It's how far south the system becomes organized. So if it's further south of the Leeward Islands, that's where we could see it become a threat to the Gulf as we head into the end of the month and into September. So Erin, right now, still a major hurricane, currently Category 3 status with 125-mile-an-hour winds, moving west-northwest at 13 miles an hour. You're able to see those rain bands moving across Puerto Rico and the northern Leeward Islands. It's moving west-northwest at 13 miles an hour, so pretty slow as it comes in contact in close proximity to those land masses. But as we look at the forecasted track, the National Hurricane Center does expect this to strengthen once again into a Category 4 hurricane within the next 24 to 48 hours. And eventually, once it moves off to cooler waters, it's going to eventually weaken, eventually into a Category 2 hurricane. But the good news in all of this is that this is going to remain offshore over open water, but it is going to bring some high rip current risk. All weather models in agreement that this very well is going to remain over open water. I think we're going to see some high wave impacts for the island of Bermuda as we head into the next 48 hours. But as we look at the wave height forecast, you're able to see the waves closer to the storm, those orange and red colors, up to 25 to 30 foot waves out in the open sea. And areas that are up and down the Caribbean, even the Bahamas, could see between maybe 4 to 6 foot high waves. But it's once that storm emerges off the coast of the East Coast U.S., it could deal with between 6 to 8 foot waves from the Carolinas all the way down to Savannah, Georgia. So expecting that system to bring some high surf, dangerous rip currents as we head into the next 48 hours across the Atlantic Ocean, especially for the continual U.S. So looking at the peak of hurricane season, right now we're around getting closer towards mid-August. The peak date is September 10th. And if we do get another named storm, it will be Fernand. Erin, already Category 5. Fernand. Next we have Gabriel, Humberto, Imelda, Jerry, Karen, and Lorenzo is next on the list. And so it's going to be interesting to see if we're going to get that far in our name list. And so this is a live stream, and if you're just now joining the live stream, we're tracking the latest in the tropics, something that we are very well keeping an eye on here at KHOU 11. We are tracking another wave emerging off the coast of Africa that has a 20% chance of development. This is all the activity that we're looking at in the Atlantic basin. We have a 10% chance off the East Coast U.S., not really a problem for anybody, but this next wave that is emerging off the African coast has a 20% chance of development, and it's very well likely could take a more of a similar path to Erin as we go into the coming days. And we have to keep an eye on that tropical organization as we head into Wednesday of this week. And so as we head maybe into Thursday is when we could see that system get closer towards the Caribbean. the Leeward Islands in the coming days. And so it's very too early to tell whether it's going to take that same northerly track or head into the Caribbean or Gulf, but something to really keep an eye on. I know there's a lot of social media posts out there that are taking one weather model that far out and taking it into the Gulf. However, you just have to be very cautious at paying attention to one model because it could go either way. We just have to wait for that system to become better organized once it gets closer towards the Leeward Islands and closer to the Caribbean Sea. And so that's what we are expecting in terms of the steering currents. One thing to have to note here is that we have two high pressure systems. This high that's currently over the south central U.S., that's going to start breaking down within the coming days. And so that very well could play a role at any system that does form, any additional systems that form, but Erin is going to be taking the path of least resistance and being swung out over open sea into the open Atlantic. It's just going to be a fish storm, as they call it, because it's not going to make any major impacts to any land masses. The only thing that we're going to have to pay attention to is the wave heights with the storms and the dangerously high rip current risk. So Erin moves north. The next area to watch just off the African coast, and this very well could swing southerly, as during this time of year we usually see that more of a northerly track over the Atlantic, or anything that does become organized closer to South America will take that southerly track into the Gulf as we head into the peak of hurricane season. And so Erin, once again, still a major hurricane, barely just missing the Puerto Rico and portions of the Dominican Republic, west-northwest at 13 miles an hour, winds at 125 miles an hour. The latest forecast track from the National Hurricane Center does have this storm once again increasing back into a Category 4 hurricane within the next 48 hours. Likely we could see a Category 4 storm once again on Monday, as it's going to have that eye wall replacement cycle that usually happens. So we're seeing some slight weakening, but once that eye wall replacement cycle occurs, we could see it become strong once again as we go into the next 2 to 3 days, but still remaining over open water, not posing a risk to any land masses. But it's just an important reminder of how powerful storms could get during this time of year when we get closer to the peak of hurricane season. And so the wave heights still rather dangerous, not really posing a threat to the Gulf, but closer to the center of the storm. You get 25 to 30 foot waves. I wouldn't be surprised if you actually get 35 to 40 foot waves closer to the storm. But then areas along the East Coast U.S. could likely be looking at maybe 8 to 10 foot waves from South Carolina all the way to the northeast off the coast of New York. So definitely expecting to see some indirect impacts for our East Coast friends, but no impacts to the Gulf, at least for the next 7 days. And it's always an important reminder, we are heading close to the peak of hurricane season. We've seen some quite significant storms during this time of year. We've had Hurricane Ike, we had Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Harvey, Irma happened around this time of year at the end of August, early September. And so it's important to know that a lot of our activity does happen between now and September 10th. And so that's what we're going to really have to keep an eye on in the next 2 to 3 days, or the next week or so, as the tropics are still pretty active across the Atlantic basin. And if we do get another named storm, the next name on the list will be Fernand. We still have Gabriel on the list. And of course, we're tracking the latest. That's the latest update as of the 10 a.m. advisory that was just released from the National Hurricane Center. Tracking Erin, not posing a threat to land, but it's another wave that is emerging off the coast of Africa that could take a similar path. So something that we're watching pretty closely, and we won't really see impacts from that at least until 8 to 10 days out from now. And so not that that's going to be heading towards the Gulf, but we really have to keep an eye on it in terms of whether it takes that northerly track or that southerly track that could take it into the Gulf or the Caribbean Sea in the next few days. And so we're tracking the latest, and we are bringing you the latest updates here at KHOU 11. And you can find the latest updates as well as extended forecasts on KHOU 11 Plus and on the KHOU 11 app. Again, I'm meteorologist Chris Ramirez with your morning 10 a.m. Tropics Update.